I was in the middle of debugging a client's security protocol when the email arrived. The subject line made me pause. URGENT, system critical failure, need immediate consultation. The sender? TechCore Industries, the same company that had laughed me out of their offices 2 years ago when I suggested their network architecture needed a complete overhaul. Your little startup is pathetic, Marcus Chen, their CTO, had sneered. What makes you think you know better than our entire development team? Now their $1 million system was crashing, and judging by the timestamp on the email, 3:47 a.m., they were desperate. I took a sip of my coffee and smiled. Karma, it seemed, had a sense of irony. 2 years earlier, the current architecture is fundamentally flawed. I explained, pointing to the diagram I'd drawn on TechCore's conference room whiteboard. You're building on legacy systems that won't scale with modern security demands. The development team shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. I'd worked alongside most of them for 5 years before starting my own company, Nova Security Solutions. They knew I was right. They'd been patching the same problems for years. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expensive suit a stark contrast to my simple black turtleneck and jeans. And I suppose what did you call it? Revolutionary security framework is the answer? The Nova framework isn't just about security, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about building systems that can adapt and evolve. The threats we're facing now are nothing compared to what's coming. Listen, Olivia, Marcus sighed, using that condescending tone he'd perfected over years of managing through intimidation. You were a decent programmer when you worked here, but this? He gestured at my presentation. This is beyond your capabilities. I felt my face flush. I've already implemented successful versions at 3 major firms. Small companies, he cut in. Playing around with basic systems. TechCore handles critical infrastructure for Fortune 500 clients. We can't risk our reputation on some unproven startup's code. The rest of the team avoided my eyes. Even James, my former mentor, stayed silent. Only Sarah, our lead database architect, seemed troubled by Marcus's dismissal. Maybe we should at least look at her documentation, Sarah suggested quietly. The scaling issues she's identified are real. The issues will be handled by our team, Marcus snapped. Using proven solutions, not experimental frameworks from glory-seeking ex-employees. I gathered my materials slowly, deliberately. Glory-seeking. I spent 2 years developing this framework, testing every component, ensuring it could handle any type of attack. But you're so convinced of your own superiority that you can't even consider the possibility that someone else might have found a better way. I think we're done here, Marcus stood. Security will show you out. And Olivia, don't bother sending any more proposals. We're not interested in amateur solutions. As I walked to the elevator, Sarah caught up with me. I'm sorry, she whispered. You know how he is. Ever since he became CTO, it's been impossible to implement any real changes. It's fine, I said, though it wasn't. Just keep an eye on those legacy systems, especially the authentication protocols. They're more vulnerable than Marcus realizes. She nodded, then hurried back as Marcus emerged from the conference room. That night, I sat in my small home office, staring at the code that had consumed the last 2 years of my life. The Nova framework wasn't just software, it was a completely new way of thinking about system security. But maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I was in over my head. My phone buzzed, a text from my brother Mike, who'd been my first investor. How'd it go? I called him instead of texting back. They shot it down. Completely. TechCore. The ones running that ancient network you used to complain about. Yeah. I ran a hand through my hair, a nervous habit from childhood. Marcus Chen basically called me a glory-seeking amateur. Mike's laugh surprised me. Perfect. That's exactly what we want them to think. What? Why would we want that? Because he said when their system inevitably fails, which you know it will, they'll have to admit they were wrong. And that admission will be worth more than any sale. I thought about the vulnerabilities I'd spotted in their system, the patches they'd built on patches, the ticking time bomb of outdated protocols. Maybe, I said. But for now, I need to focus on clients who actually want our solution. The next 2 years proved Mike right and wrong. The Nova framework didn't just work, it exceeded even my expectations. Our client list grew steadily, each success building our reputation in the cybersecurity community. Companies that had initially dismissed us as unproven started calling, asking for demonstrations. I expanded the team carefully, hiring only the best developers who shared my vision of adaptive security. We moved from my home office to a real workspace in a downtown tech hub. Industry publications started mentioning Nova Security Solutions as a rising star in the cybersecurity field. But TechCore, they doubled down on their old systems, adding more layers of patches and workarounds. I kept tabs on them through industry contacts, watching as they dismissed warning signs and celebrated band-aid solutions. Sarah occasionally sent me cryptic messages about their growing technical debt. The authentication issues you mentioned? They're getting worse. Marcus won't listen. I knew it was only a matter of time before something broke catastrophically. I just didn't expect it to happen quite so spectacularly. The email from TechCore contained multiple attachments, system logs, error reports, and a desperate plea for help. Their main authentication server had crashed, taking down critical client systems across 3 continents. The backup systems, instead of failing over gracefully, had cascaded into a complete network meltdown. Exactly the scenario I'd warned them about 2 years ago. As I read through the technical details, my phone rang. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "How bad is it?" I asked without preamble. "Worse than the logs show," she sounded exhausted. "We've got major financial institutions locked out of their own systems. Trading floors are down. Marcus is having a meltdown in his office. And now you want my amateur solution?" She caught the edge in my voice. "Olivia, I'm sorry about before. We all are. But right now, we need help. Your help. You're the only one who really understands these systems." I leaned back in my chair, looking around my office at Nova Security Solutions. Awards lined the walls now. Industry certifications, framed articles about our revolutionary approach to adaptive security. Everything Marcus had dismissed as impossible. It's not that simple, Sarah. The Nova framework isn't just something you can patch in. It requires a complete architectural redesign. "I know," she said quietly. "That's why Marcus is willing to give you complete control over the recovery and rebuild. Whatever you need. Whatever it costs." I felt a smile spread across my face. Whatever it costs. That's not what Marcus said in his email. He mentioned a consultation fee. That was before the last 3 systems crashed. Now he's desperate. We all are. I pulled up the Nova Framework's core documentation on my second monitor. Put him on the phone. "Olivia," Marcus's voice had lost all its condescension. "We need your help." "No," I corrected him. "You need the Nova Framework. The same solution you called amateur and pathetic. Are you ready to admit you were wrong?" The silence stretched for several seconds. I could almost hear him swallowing his pride. "Yes," he finally managed. "We were wrong. You were right. Please, what will it take?" I looked at the time, 4:15 a.m. Somewhere in the financial district, trading floors were dark. Banks were locked out of their systems, and TechCore's reputation was bleeding out by the second. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said. "Have your team ready. And Marcus, this time you're going to listen to every word I say." TechCore's offices were chaos when I arrived. The usually quiet development floor buzzed with panicked energy as teams huddled around monitors, desperately trying to patch the failing systems. The same developers who had smirked at my amateur solution 2 years ago now looked at me with desperate hope as I walked through. Marcus met me at the conference room, the same one where he dismissed my warnings. His perfectly tailored suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened. He looked like he aged a decade in one night. "Thank God you're here," he said, reaching to shake my hand. "The situation has deteriorated." I walked past him to the whiteboard, already pulling up system diagnostics on my laptop. "I don't need pleasantries, Marcus. I need your team. All of them. Now." Within 5 minutes, the conference room was packed. Sarah sat closest to me, her usual neat appearance disheveled from hours of emergency debugging. James, my old mentor, couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Here's the situation," I began, drawing a quick diagram of their system architecture. "Your authentication protocols didn't just fail, they failed spectacularly because every patch you've added over the years created new vulnerabilities. When the main server crashed, it triggered a cascade of failures through your entire network." "We understand that," Marcus interrupted. "What we need is—" "What you need," I cut him off sharply, is to shut up and listen. 2 years ago, you wouldn't hear what I had to say. Now you don't have a choice. The room fell silent. I continued drawing, mapping out the disaster they created. Your backup systems failed because they're running on the same flawed architecture. Every redundancy you built is compromised by the same fundamental design issues. The Nova framework isn't just a patch. It's a complete reimagining of how security systems should work. I pulled up my laptop's display on the main screen, showing them the framework's core architecture. Traditional security systems are like castle walls, rigid, unchanging. The Nova framework is more like an immune system. It learns, adapts, and evolves to meet new threats. When one part is attacked, the entire system responds and strengthens. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes lighting up with understanding. That's why our patches kept failing. We were trying to reinforce walls that were already crumbling. Exactly. I started typing, bringing up the framework's deployment protocols. I can get your critical systems back online using a stripped-down version of Nova. But fixing this properly will take weeks, maybe months. Months? Marcus looked like he might faint. Our clients. We'll have to decide if they want to stick with a company that ignored major security risks or one that's finally taking them seriously. I turned to face him directly. My team can handle the rebuild. But I have conditions. He swallowed hard. Name them. First, Nova Security Solutions takes complete control of the reconstruction. Your team works under our direction, no exceptions. Marcus nodded quickly. Second, we're not just patching the existing system. We're rebuilding from the ground up using the Nova framework. That means licenses, training, and ongoing support contracts. The cost, he started to protest, will be nothing compared to what you're losing every minute your client's systems are down. I smiled coldly. What's your current downtime costing? $1 million an hour. More? His face told me I hit the mark. And finally, I continued, you're going to publicly acknowledge that your failure to adopt modern security protocols led to this disaster. No hiding behind vague press releases about technical difficulties. Your clients deserve to know you've learned from your mistakes. The room was dead silent as Marcus considered my terms. Every developer present knew I was right. They'd been fighting these issues for years, watching the technical debt pile up while management ignored the warnings. If we agree, he said slowly, how quickly can you get critical systems back online? I cracked my knuckles and turned back to my laptop. Give me 3 hours with your core authentication servers. Sarah, I'll need you and your team to handle the client-side implementations. She was already pulling up command terminals. Just tell us what to do. The next 12 hours were a blur of code, coffee, and carefully orchestrated system recoveries. I brought in my lead developers from Nova, and together we began the delicate process of stabilizing TechCore's crumbling infrastructure. By noon, we had the critical systems back online using a temporary implementation of the Nova framework's core protocols. By midnight, we'd established a stable baseline for the full reconstruction to begin. I found Marcus in his office around 2 a.m., staring out at the city lights. The immediate crisis is contained, I told him. But this is just the beginning. Your entire system needs to be rebuilt properly. He turned, and for the first time, I saw real humility in his expression. Why did you come? After how we treated you, you could have let us burn. I thought about it for a moment, because this isn't about revenge. It's about building something better. The Nova framework isn't just my creation. It's a new way of thinking about security. Even if you couldn't see that 2 years ago, your clients deserve the protection it offers. We were wrong, he said quietly. I was wrong. Your amateur solution just saved our company. No, I corrected him. What saved your company was finally being willing to admit you needed help. The question is, have you really learned from this? The reconstruction took 3 months. We rebuilt TechCore's entire network infrastructure from the ground up, training their teams in the Nova framework's principles as we went. Sarah became our primary liaison, her natural understanding of adaptive systems making her the perfect bridge between old and new. The industry took notice. Our very public reconstruction of TechCore became a case study in modernizing critical systems. Other companies, facing similar issues with aging infrastructure, started calling. The Nova framework wasn't just a solution anymore, it was becoming the new standard. 6 months after the crisis, I stood in front of a packed auditorium at the National Cybersecurity Conference. Marcus sat in the front row as I presented our case study. From catastrophe to innovation, rebuilding critical infrastructure for the modern age. The lesson isn't just about technology, I concluded. It's about the danger of believing we know everything. Innovation doesn't care about hierarchy or tradition. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places, from the amateurs and outsiders who see problems differently. The applause was gratifying, but the real satisfaction came later, at the reception. Marcus approached me, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Quite a journey from that first presentation in our conference room," he said, handing me a glass. "The difference is, this time you were ready to listen." He nodded. "You know, we've had headhunters trying to poach your team, offering ridiculous salaries." "I know," I smiled. "Sarah told me. But they're not interested." "Why not?" "Because at Nova, they're not just writing code, they're building the future. No amount of money can replace that feeling." Marcus raised his glass. "To amateur solutions and the professionals smart enough to embrace them." I clinked my glass against his. "To learning from our mistakes and building something better." Later that night, back in my office at Nova Security Solutions, I looked at the framed whiteboard diagram from my first TechCore presentation. I kept it as a reminder, not of rejection, but of conviction. Sometimes being right isn't enough. You have to be right and patient enough to wait for others to see it too. My phone buzzed, another company facing critical system failures, another team of experts finally ready to admit they needed help. I smiled as I read their desperate plea for consultation. The Nova framework wasn't just my redemption story. It was proof that true innovation doesn't come from defending old systems, but from having the courage to build new ones. Even if that means starting over. Even if that means being laughed at. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. People often ask me if I enjoy being the one who saved TechCore, if it feels good to have proven my critics wrong. But the truth is, it was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving that there's always a better way, if we're brave enough to build it. The Nova framework continues to evolve, each new challenge making it stronger, more adaptive. Just like its creator, it grew stronger from rejection, better for having been underestimated. And somewhere in TechCore's newly rebuilt system, buried deep in the core authentication protocols, there's a comment in the code that reads, "Sometimes the best solutions come from the people you least expect." Never stop questioning. Never stop building. Odo. It's not just a signature. It's a reminder that innovation doesn't care about titles or reputations. It cares about vision, persistence, and the courage to keep building even when no one else believes in what you see. That's the real legacy of the Nova framework, not just secure systems, but a new way of thinking about problems. And sometimes that's worth more than all the validation in the world.